graffitis have always been controversial. They can be perceived as a blight that taint the streets or as a symptom of the decadence of society in current times. However, we can see that all around the world a new wave of colors is flooding the streets of big and small cities alike. These streets that could only offer horizons made of concrete to their residents now have become imaginary windows through which to behold warm, rebellious, oniric or even psychedelic sceneries. This wave, this phenomenon, is what is known as urban art and is constantly changing the immediate reality of our urban environments. But if this is a phenomenon that is taking place worldwide and many people, even local governments, seem to appreciate seeing urban artworks in their districts, then is it something good or bad for our cities? That's what we want to figure out in today's video. And because of that, we'll answer the following questions. First, what exactly is urban art and what are the differences between graffitis, street art and urban art? Second, what are the benefits that urban art brings to our cities? And third, what are its possible potential negative impacts on the territory?
In order to answer these questions, we will focus on the case of Bayonne, a city whose people have managed to combine the preservation of its historical downtown with urban art in order to try to make a nicer place and more attractive place for everyone.
Let's start with a little bit of context of our case study, Bayonne.
Bayonne is a city located in the southwest of France, in what is commonly known as the French Basque Country or the Northern Basque Country, not far away from the Spanish border. Despite being a small city of around 50,000 inhabitants, Bayonne has always had lots of different tourist assets like historic architecture, festivals, gastronomy, museums, etc.
In 2017, the Space Junk Art Center, now known as Galeria 2, which is a non-profit cultural organization whose mission is to promote the street and urban art, joined forces with the City Council of Bayonne and the Communauté d'Agglomération Pays Basque, which is a consortium of municipalities of the French Basque Country. And together, they launched the first Festival Point de Vue. In English, it could be translated as Viewpoints Festival, aimed at promoting urban art and attracting international artists from all over the world to the city and let them create dozens of murals, frescoes, and other kinds of urban artworks.
The festival was a huge success and it expanded the city's cultural appeal, while also attracting new types of visitors thanks to the city's evolving urban landscape.
Since then, the festival has been held every year, with each edition bringing a new batch of murals to the various districts of Bayonne, especially those areas that are less touristy.
The festival often lasts for 5-6 days, and every actor, all kinds of actors of this city get involved, and they organize all kinds of different events.
Screenings of documentaries about street art, jam sessions, concerts, and even activities for children with live painting sessions and introductions to graffiti techniques.
And this is precisely one of the defining points of urban art, and one of the main differences with regards to graffitis or street art. That is, the engagement of all kinds of actors of the city in the production and promotion of urban artworks.
Because no, graffitis, street art and urban art are not synonyms, and these three terms have specific significances to them.
Their differences change the way these artworks are perceived, are seen by public administrations, art dealers, and even the justice system.
So let's get to the core of this issue and let's take a look at the most essential core element of this discussion: graffitis. A graffiti can be defined as the act of writing or scribbling on walls or other kinds of surfaces of public space, usually on public property, and it's been around for thousands of years. At first it was a technique that involved scratching or marking the surface, thus leaving a sort of inscription made by someone with something to tell or communicate. This action harks back to the beginning of times, when people wanted to communicate something by writing on rocks, walls, or even monuments. Romans in the 1st century before Christ regularly inscribed messages on public walls, while at the other side of the wall, Mayans were also scratching drawings onto their surfaces. Graffitis, in their contemporary sense, became associated with rock and roll in the 60s and with hip-hop culture from the 70s onwards, being particularly predominant in New York City and Philadelphia, and tags being one of their most predominant and well-known forms. Peace, the fight for freedom, the defense of human rights, as well as even the sheer will of being noticed by the world, were some of the reasons for using graffitis on the streets. The use of graffitis in its spray paint form, them being hard to remove, using bold vivid colors and placed in public urban space, makes it evident that these signs, tags, messages, and drawings are made with the aim at communicating with their peers, thriving to be seen, noticed, recognized by them.
It is in their very nature to be rebellious and do things outside the norm, outside legality. And they do not seek the approval of authorities or residents, but just wish to leave a mark in their surroundings, mainly understandable to be understood for their peers.
Because of that, graffitis are inherently illegal and against the status quo, made by people who rebel or protest, consciously or unconsciously, against the way things are. But if contemporary graffitis are spray paint and scribblings, that is, artistic expressions at their core that happen and belong to the streets, then what is the street art? And what makes it different from graffitis? Well, street art can be defined as a form of visual art that is created in public spaces, often without formal permission, with the aim of engaging a broad audience using a wide array of materials, techniques, and artistic resources that go far and beyond the use of spray painting. The origins of the concept of street art dates back to the 80s, when the concept gained significant traction thanks to the American art critic and historian Alan Schwartzman and his book called Street Art, in which he described the burgeoning movement of artists creating unauthorized art in public spaces, particularly around American cities. The first difference between street art and graffitis is that the former is created not only to be understood and appreciated by other graffiti artists and their peers, but for a broader audience. Street art wants to attract the attention of people in order to communicate something that has to do with them, that resonates with them, with the people. Street art looks for this connection with the common people. Another key component of street art is its political and activist nature. The artists seek to represent and deliver the local community's voice and thoughts to the public. Street art is also inherently independent and anti-institutional, anti-establishment, and it wants to distance itself from governments and the traditional art market, because its primary intention is to communicate with passerbys and provoke thought, using the urban environment as a canvas.
Because of that, street art does not limit itself to spray paintings and makes use of all kinds of artistic techniques, resources, and materials to convey their message.
Banksy is probably one of the most famous examples of a street artist, and his works perfectly reflect what the street art is about, and his actions too. So, having seen all that, where does this leave the concept of urban art? Urban art is a broader category than street art. It is usually a term used to summarize all forms of visual art that are born in urban areas. It stems from graffiti and street art, and because of that, it shares many characteristics with them. Urban art, like street art, emphasizes spontaneous and ephemeral interventions on the urban space that engage directly with the urban environment and local communities, setting it apart from other elements that can be found in the city, like public monuments or statues, which would fall into the category of public art instead of urban art. But let's leave the difference between public art and urban art for another video in case you're interested. As the scholars Brastelli and Zanello point out, urban art is about everything which can be connected to the urban, which includes artworks that are either on the streets or inside private walls, within the walls of galleries or museums.
Because yes, unlike street art, urban art is not inherently anti-institutional, and it is not confined to streets. Actually, the opposition between the art that takes place on the streets and the traditional art, the art of high culture, is not as applicable to urban art.
To put it simple, while street art belongs to the streets, urban art belongs to the city, and the city is made up by many different people.
Due to that, urban art doesn't want to leave anyone behind, and that's the reason why it engages with all kinds of actors of the city, from public administrations to private galleries and museums.
Urban art has expanded beyond the local and now has become a sort of global art movement which acts for the underrepresented communities and stands up for the topics which are either overlooked or controversial. Actually, thanks to the globalized network of communications that we have nowadays, urban artworks interest and resonate with communities all around the world. What's more, many of these urban artists do their works outside their hometowns, in other cities, and establish connections with the local communities where they do these works, thus strengthening these ties and the idea of urban art becoming a sort of global art movement. And this is exactly what happened in Bayonne, where both public and private organizations join forces every year to promote urban art in the city. These actors consider that urban art can breathe new life into the urban landscape. In other words, they are aware of all the positive impacts that urban art can bring to the city. Some of these positive impacts are the following ones. First, urban artworks embellish our urban areas, filling with vibrant colors the urban landscapes that once could only offer grey horizons to the residents. But it is not just that. Urban artworks can reframe a space in terms of aesthetics, making it more beautiful, but also in terms of usefulness. Almost all cities have quarters, districts, or suburbs that present serious socioeconomic challenges, where people are more vulnerable and where there are many old derelict buildings. By painting frescoes on walls of these buildings, they can get new meanings and new uses, thus revitalizing its surroundings and improving the services and quality of life of those quarters. Urban regeneration can also have many other different positive outcomes. For example, the installation of urban artworks can be a catalyst for improving street lighting, thus improving the neighborhood's walkability and even safety after dark. It can also enable an improvement of transportation systems in those districts in order to keep bringing people there.
Actually, the neighborhood of Saint-Esprit, the epicenter of urban art here in Bayonne, historically served as a transportation hub, and it was very useful thanks to its trains and connection to other regions. However, it was often overlooked compared to other areas of the city like the Petit Bayonne and Grand Bayonne. Fortunately, urban art helped to gradually revitalize and reframe the area, thus becoming a rather artsy neighborhood in Bayonne.
Urban art can also raise awareness of important topics for both the residents and the artists. That is, it can draw attention to important issues and spark conversations within the community, given that urban art is a powerful tool for visualizing topics that are either overlooked or even sometimes ignored by governments and mass media. As we've seen before, both street art and urban art are inherently political and have the capacity to connect with broader audiences. This fact, along with its accessible nature, because everybody can enjoy and understand these artworks, and they are not confined within private walls, within private galleries or museums, it can be useful for raising awareness for important matters like civil and human rights, for example. Following this line of thought, urban art can also be very useful for educational purposes. Events like Bayonne's Urban Art Festival not only allow young people to learn graffiti and muralism techniques or participate in workshops which cover relevant social issues, the accessibility and socio-political nature of urban art can foster critical thinking, questioning the reality that surrounds us. Because of that, many local governments let urban art bloom. If they take this strategy seriously and do not try to reign over it too rigidly, then they will have an opportunity to improve the democratic quality of the territory. How's that? Well, because the promotion of human rights, democratic values, critical thinking, and even the promotion of political participation are things that urban art is good at, things that can improve our democracies. These characteristics also make urban art great for community building. It can stimulate the creation of spaces that make people feel represented, strengthen community ties, and give people a sense of ownership and belonging to their neighborhoods. This way, community building allows for a reinforcement of a commonly shared local identity based on the local values, the values of that community, thus also contributing to the promotion of the local culture of that place. As we've seen, urban art can be useful for making our cities more attractive. And one of the reasons for making a city more attractive is precisely to attract more economic opportunities, either investments or tourists. A beautiful urban environment is more pleasant to walk around, and it allows for the creation of touristic landmarks and routes, which can lead to a stimulation of local economy and an enhancement of the city branding of that place. Having seen all these positive impacts, that does not mean that urban art cannot have also negative impacts on the territory. Although there is no empirical data proving that there's been some negative impacts due to the existence of urban art in Bayonne, our case study, rather the opposite, because the festival has apparently been welcomed by all actors of society there. That does not mean, however, that urban art can have no drawbacks at all. The first one can be gentrification. This is a phenomenon that has taken place and is currently taking place in many cities from all around the world, from New York City to London or Barcelona, where gentrification coincided with cultural revitalization efforts, including urban art strategies, which ironically ends up doing the opposite of what urban art pursues. And related to gentrification, there is another issue, another problem, and that is the excessive tourist pressure. Consequently, working class districts can morph into tourist attractions, straining local infrastructure and creating tensions between residents and tourists. Studies indicate that tourist-oriented gentrification, driven by short-term rentals like Airbnb, accelerates the previously mentioned displacement process and alters local dynamics, which also erodes social cohesion in the area. Another problem is that while urban art seeks to connect with local communities, there is also the danger of having the opposite effect. What do I mean by that? It being a global phenomenon that moves thousands of people from all around the world, an unbalanced urban art strategy implemented by local governments can end up flooding the place with global narratives that have nothing to do with the reality of the local communities. That is, narratives that do not connect with the residents, as well as a shift focus to commercial appeal to attract more tourists and economic opportunities to the territory. This way, an excessive influx of new visitors, along with the arrival of wealthier people, can completely erode the social fabric of that neighborhood. Another negative impact, although an indirect one, is cleanliness. While murals and urban artworks add a lot of colors and visual interest to the streets, it also normalizes the presence of spray paintings in the neighborhood. Consequently, graffitis and low-effort tagging spread widely, even over signals, windows, and other murals. This can give the impression that the city is dirty and unkempt. And last but not least, another problem that has more to do with local governments than with urban art per se. The problem is that governments might be tempted to use urban art as short-term patches for long-term problems. Urban art has lots of positive impacts, as we've seen, but it will never obviously substitute local policies. Governments might be tempted to use this visually pleasant phenomenon to cover deeper problems like poverty, inequality, bad management of urban land, or problems related to social mobility and cost of living. And this is not a responsibility that belongs to urban artists, but that belongs to public administrations, who should not use urban art for hiding their incompetence and lack of will for solving these issues. And of course, there's still the issue that many people associate the art that takes place on the streets with vandalism, or the issue of how graffitis and the problems of graffitis get mixed with urban art when, as we've seen, they are not the same at all. But we leave this topic for another video in which we will explore deeper the relationship between urban art, vandalism, and order. After exploring Bayonne's streets, it is quite clear that urban art has left an indelible mark to its urban environment, city branding, and also local identity of its community. Urban art has helped reframing many urban spaces of the least touristy areas of the city, like the quarter of Saint-Esprit, which now is an aesthetically charming and original area that attracts a different kind of visitors than the other historical districts of Bayonne, like Petit and Grand Bayonne. This has been possible thanks to the efforts made by both private and public actors. The result being almost everyone embracing urban art in the city, because as I've said at the beginning of this video, that's one of the powers of urban art, being able to paint colorful presents and futures that everyone gets to enjoy. Urban art is essentially a joint effort that goes beyond the artistic drive of the painters, who usually engage with the residents before making their artworks so that everyone can be part of the artistic process. And that is something, as we've seen, that sets urban art apart from graffitis and street art. Urban art belongs to the city, and consequently, it involves all the actors of that city, and is spontaneous, engaging, political, activist, and global. Because of that, urban art can help with urban regeneration, critical thinking, community building, raising awareness of overlooked and controversial topics, or even stimulating local economy. However, as usual, it is important to have clear, well-designed policies with regards to urban art, in order to avoid potential negative impacts like gentrification, excessive tourist pressure, or the erosion of social local fabric. Urban art is not here to magically solve all of our issues, That is a task, a responsibility for public institutions, public administrations, and politicians. But it can be a powerful tool for making our immediate lives a little more beautiful and meaningful. So if you've liked this video, I encourage you to give a like, subscribe for more content. Thank you for your time and attention, and have a nice day. Peace.